Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talking Tech with Codebase. Today, we're talking about building AI that you can trust, how teams actually build with AI. My name is Justin, co-founder Codebase, and today we're going to have Tarak and Fatima telling you a little bit about how teams are really building with AI. So, Tarak, why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll dive right in.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Tarak. I do believe everyone already knows me, but I'm very excited to talking with you today. We are going to spend around 1 hour together. We wanted to invite Fatima. I think she has a lot of knowledge, a lot of insight to share with us about the way she saw big teams and individual contributors adopting AI at scale. So that's why we wanted to invite her. Hi, Fatima. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me.
So, can you tell us maybe a little bit about yourself? I know that one of the reasons that I really wanted you to be here today was also because you did a great course on LinkedIn. I really appreciated it. I learned a lot. So, this is the course Accelerate DevOps and Software Development with AI. Can you tell us a little bit of what was the course about, and maybe share with us some experience using AI and why were you interested in AI in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. So the history behind the course is basically when AI tools first started coming out. Obviously, there was a lot of hype around them. Understandably so. They're extremely powerful tools that I believe every software engineer should be leveraging in their day-to-day workflows. But I think it's also important, just like with any new tool that comes out, to like sort of look beyond the hype as well, right? Like a lot of other software engineers, I initially fell into the sort of the trap of like, oh, it's going to replace software engineers and it's like the end of, software engineering as we know it. But then as I slowly started using the tools and they became a part of my day-to-day workflow, I started realizing that, oh, okay, these are really powerful. They're great at certain tasks, but that does not mean that I can outsource my critical thinking to these tools, which is exactly why I created the LinkedIn Learning course. The crux of that course was, again, just the importance of giving people this reminder that these tools are fantastic. You should be leveraging them, absolutely. But that does not mean that you leave your critical thinking at the door. You still need your skills, like your problem solving skills, your ability to question things, question assumptions, test cases, edge cases, corner cases. You still need all of that. Um, yeah, that's how the course came about.
And when you speak about it, I have one question as well is like, how would you advise maybe a company or someone who is just starting out of AI? How can he start learning? How can he learn the best practices? Because I do think there is a way to use AI. And like you said, I agree with you. AI, for me, I always consider it as an enabler, not a replacement.
Yeah.
Of course, I do believe that the more we are used to using AI, the better we are and the faster and more secure we are. But can you give us some tips of, okay, I'm a new engineer, either cloud engineer, software engineer. How can I start learning about AI? How can I use AI more effectively in my daily job?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll start off by saying that when it comes to companies, I think just like a lot of, when it comes, like we have to sort of approach it more from the perspective of, okay, we have to level up our teams as opposed to just like one single, like on there can be, we all know developers who are like, who might be really good at prompting, right? They might be really really good at using these AI tools to their advantage. So I think first of all we need to keep us the same perspective there, that okay, we need to level up teams, not just specific individuals. When it comes to leveling up teams, I would say like a great thing that you can do is, again, setting up templates and checklists, especially when it comes to, let's say, a new engineer on your team, right? They might not have the context, they might not know the terminology, they might not know, like, like lingo that's used only within your team or your company. So it's really important to standardize that, okay, you have like this checklist, it contains like, common terminologies, or like let's say your corporation has certain rules, right? that is enclosed within those templates and those checklists. Um, Generally speaking, listen, if you look at a prompt, there's a couple of things that I would say there's like key things that I like to keep in mind when I'm using an AI tool. The input that you provided, right? Then there's the context that you provided. So when I say input, I'm talking more, I usually like to think about it more in terms of prompting, that okay, am I asking it, like what am I asking it, right? Like am I asking it to draft a message for me? Am I asking it to summarize like an incident that happened, for me? So that's the first thing that I look at. What is the input to the model? The second part is the context. So again, have I provided it with all the relevant information, whether that's logs or articles or whatever that is? And then the third thing is the output. That's also really important, because again, these models will give you sort of like freestyle text, right? So it's also important that you provide constraints in terms of your output as well. That okay, let's say if I'm drafting a message for like an incident that happened, I want you to summarize it first, and I want you to give me like a step-by-step chronological order of events, then I want you to talk about the resolution. So those are, I would say, the top things that I like to keep in mind when I'm prompting a model. And I think that's a great starting point for any new engineer on a team.
So input, context,
Context.
and
Yes, and
output,
output.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And I see it a lot because I'm working with our cloud engineering community every single day on InfraCodeBase. And you're right, it's about, as well, it's about prompting, but more in terms of specification,
Yeah.
like spec-driven development, for example.
Yeah.
Do you have any good example or best practices when, for example, you need to prompt something?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a couple of things that you can do which can take your prompts to the next level. Now, again, like I said, the more sort of vague and ambiguous your prompt is, the more trouble you might have with like standardization, right? Like two people can prompt a model in two different ways. And because again, these models generate freestyle text, you might get two completely different answers, right? So when it comes to prompting, number one, something that you can do is what we call like one-shot prompting. So you ask within your prompt, you ask, like, you have a specific request, and you hope that the model understands the style. So you could say that, okay, help me write a LinkedIn post about flaky tests, make it friendly and practical, and it should be like this many character limits, right? Now this will work, but it's fragile, right? Because again, the prompt is sort of, it's a little vague. There's room for ambiguity in there. Then there's another thing that you can try out, which is what we call few shot prompting, which is where you provide a couple of examples, right? That okay, here's like one example of my writing style, here's another. Now write a LinkedIn post about, let's say, flaky tests in the same style, right? That's better, because now you're providing it with examples. Then there's something called role-based prompting. I actually use role-based prompting a lot, and I found it really, really helpful when I was interviewing. Because I was prepping for like behavioral interviews. So I would give the AI model my answer, and I would ask it to critique it, assuming that I'm applying for like a, senior or staff level position. And, so that the role-based prompting really helps as well. And then you can also try out something called step-by-step prompting, which is where you give the model like a series of steps, right? That, okay, I am solving this problem. First, think step-by-step through the problem, then give me the final code, then add comments, then write tests, right? So yeah, those are a couple of ways in which you can, take your prompt from just, getting something done to getting an output which is more specific and more tailored to your use case.
And so if I go back to the three steps that you mentioned earlier, like input, context, and output, basically imagine that, for example, I am a cloud engineer writing Terraform, or I am a software engineer. The first recommendation that you will give me is not directly to start writing code using AI, but basically to set up all the guardrails, all the layers. This is what you call basically the input and the context. So once I think about input and context first, then I have basically everything that I need to use AI at scale. Because one of the challenges that I see as well is like a lot of people are saying like code is not a bottleneck anymore. Like you can ship code, you can write code, 1,000 of line of code, for
Mhm.
example, during a few minutes, where basically earlier it would have taken weeks maybe. But it means also on the security side, it means
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we are also shipping more and more vulnerabilities. Like, and especially when, for example, we don't test the code that we are
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
that the AI is doing. Any
yeah.
recommendation on, yeah, on this?
Yeah, I think number one, like I said, I think just if if we're talking just about the mentality that I think software teams should, first thing to keep in mind is again like that importance of critical thinking. That okay, you're not like I think to answer this question, I think it's really important to also remind people that listen, these AI tools, they're not replacing the search engine. They're not replacing the search engine, right? So you still it's a tool that predicts the next token for you, right? So I think it's important
Yeah.
to understand how these tools work, what are the underlying mechanics, and I think that can help sort of dictate how we approach shipping code that is produced by these tools. It's really important, like I said, to have that in like critical thinking, right? You don't want to just take whatever these tools give you. Absolutely not. Number two is the importance of setting up guardrails. That it should,
Yes.
let's say, if you have generated something that I've really appreciated, like in some of the work that I've done, is that when engineers have used AI to generate, let's say, test cases or whatnot, they like always specify in the pull request that, oh, this code was generated by an AI tool. I appreciate that. I appreciate that heads up, because that tells me that okay, I'm gonna take a little like extra, a little harder look at this piece of code. So yeah, setting up those guardrails is really important, and that includes not only these checks that okay, if a piece of code was generated by an AI tool, we make sure that it gets reviewed thoroughly by other engineers. But again, it starts first with that mentality. It starts by first that these tools are fantastic, but you still need to be using your problem solving skills.
And I have a question as well, because you said the code needs to be reviewed by other engineers. But let's say that, for example, I'm working on a large code base of multiple thousand of line of code. Engineers, for them, maybe it could be very challenging to review the code. How would they use AI basically to review it? Like, how can they use AI, as you said, as an enabler, but to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
before even creating a new repository or provisioning, for example, the infrastructure, if we speak about cloud, is like how can they put in motion the guardrails that they need to make sure that they can use AI at scale?
Yeah, let's say I really liked your question about how can you use, let's say, AI to even review the code that you generated, right? I think a great way to do that is to actually listen. The funny thing, the very sort of very interesting thing that I find about AI tools is that they give you answers with a lot of confidence. The funny thing is
Mhm.
that as humans, we interpret confidence as like this like sort of stamp of approval, in the sense that when we hear someone very confident speaking, we think, oh, they must be right, right? So with AI tools, you need to ask them to sort of find the flaws in its own argument. So if it gives you, let's say, a piece of code, ask the AI tool, okay, can you list what assumptions you used while you created this piece of code? Something that happened very recently with me, I was doing this investigation at work, and I was someone had asked me a question about one of our services, so I was using an AI tool and I asked it that, okay, answer this question for me, and can you give me a list of the resources that you used while coming up with
Yeah.
this answer? It came up with a really, really nice list of resources. I was like, this is fantastic. I'm about to like copy paste the answer, and then I was like, okay, let me just check the list that it's given me, and they were all broken links. Like it had created like just fictitious, links out of nowhere, and they looked extremely reliable, right? So I think something worth mentioning is that yeah, always ask, if you're looking for to use these AI tools to review things that they've generated, ask it to tell you what assumptions it made while it was producing that output.
So you made me smile because it's like at beginning when we use AI, we were already thinking about the answer that AI is going to give us is actually the right answer. We cannot challenge it. The
Exactly.
way you
Exactly.
are thinking about it, I really like it because it becomes more and more a relationship between the human and AI, but and you challenge AI the way you would challenge another human as well.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
is you
Right.
can challenge the you can basically challenge the output of AI, and you don't need to take what the AI is giving you as a golden rule.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and one thing as well, I know that is the topic of of the webinar today. It's how teams can build
Hmm.
with AI. I have the
Yeah.
feeling that right now it was a lot on adoption, about guardrails and so on, and I can do that as an individual contributor myself. But imagine that I'm a team of 10 people. I'm a manager. Everyone wants to use AI in my team, but I have one cloud engineer that is
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
good at,
Hmm.
at using AI.
Yeah.
How can I scale the work of the others? How can I
Yeah.
make sure that every engineer, like the 9 others, actually are as good as the best one of my team?
Yeah. Absolutely. Like I said earlier, I think the way to do it is to scale it the same way that we would scale engineering. We want to turn those individual tricks and tips and tricks that a certain power user knows into shared systems, right? So the number one, like first thing, I would start off by like we want to shift the focus from relying on clever prompts to standardizing the workflow, right? So like these power users, they don't just write better prompts, they also have a better process, right? So they could naturally be doing things like clarifying the task, providing background, specifying a specific like format in which they should get the answer, and then sanity checking the output, everything that we just talked about so far.
Yeah.
We want to capture that as a template so that everyone across the team can use that. That's how it becomes more consistent.
So
Then
you made a
yeah.
really you made a comment. Mirza had a great question here, Fatima. Don't you think instead of asking the same LLM, ask another LLM as a judge to challenge and verify as well, right? Sometimes when we feel locked into an ecosystem, but yeah, like often even myself, I'll find myself in Chat GPT and Claude Code and Cursor and like using different models and trying different things
Hmm.
to see if I get similar results or outputs or lines of
Yeah.
thinking. So, what is your perspective on that?
That's a really good question. I think it's definitely something that I've been sort of experimenting with as well. There's again, I think like right now we're at a time where we're seeing a lot of these tools come out, but I also think that we have so many options right now that I think even that prospect is might be very overwhelming for engineers. Which tool should I stick to, right? Should I try one over the other? Genuinely, I like from what I've seen in my experience, I think stick to maybe like a couple, like 2 to 3, right? But I would say that it's sort of like sort of the way that you would approach a decision in your like non-technical life. You know how they say that like too many cooks spoil the dish, right? So like you also don't want to go to like 20 different like AI tools and ask it like the same question, right? You're just going to get bogged down by all the different variations that you're seeing. Again, like I said, that's where your critical thinking skills will come in. You might be writing a very simple function. Each AI tool might give you a slightly different looking function, but if you're using your critical thinking skills, you'll be able to rationalize the output that they're giving you, and you'll be like, oh, I'll pick one over the other because maybe it offers you better readability or whatever it is, right? So yeah, long story short, I would say I don't think you need to get bogged down by, oh, how many different AI tools should I try out. I think stick to maybe like 2 to 3. Some, I agree, some might be better suited for certain tasks over others, like Cursor for sure. Or windsurf, or again something like infra code base for more engineering focused tasks. Maybe if it's like tasks like, oh, I don't know, writing emails or whatnot, I'll
Yeah.
use something like ChatGPT, right? But beyond that, yeah, I don't think you need to be trying out like 10 different tools to like cross question one another.
And I'm smiling because, to be honest, I also do believe that is more related to how can I scale the work of my best engineer? How can I make, for example, make sure that we build a producer consumer model? Like producer, for example, is like working with the engineers for him to create his own way of working with templates, with own guardrails, with own governance style, and then another team that is basically using his work to scale. So for me, it's less about using different tools because at the end of the day, my goal when, for example, I'm using AI is to scale my work,
Yeah.
meaning scale in terms of speed, but also in terms of security as well. So it's not because I'm going to check 10 different output from
Yeah.
10 different AI, LLM, and so on, but first it's going to reduce my velocity. And second, it doesn't make it more secure.
Yeah.
But exactly what you said, by making sure that I can scale the work of one engineer, making sure that everything else is going to apply to its own best practices, I
Yeah.
think is the way we can scale the work of an
Absolutely.
enterprise or a
Yeah.
mid-market organization.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. So sorry, just to
no,
like,
no, yeah, yeah,
because you were talking about, again, scaling across teams. Like I said, you can also, like, it's also important to sort of standardize the context packs, right? Like within certain orgs, a lot of like power users have invisible knowledge in their heads, right? Like whether that's certain product quirks, whether that those are policy details, whether those are do's and don'ts, edge cases, company language, all of that can be encapsulated within a context pack. And again, like these things don't have to be complicated. It can literally just be like a Notion page, right, where you're just listing that, okay, here's the template, here's how you use an LLM to get a certain kind of output. But yeah.
And one thing as well, I am seeing a lot of people saying that you cannot use AI at scale, or AI, it shouldn't touch prod, it shouldn't touch production. So there is always a trade-off between using AI and remaining safe.
Hmm.
So it's also the goal of the topic today is building with AI you can trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe you are repeating yourself, but I think it's really important, like, to have the three steps that you spoke
Yeah.
about earlier: the input, the context, and the output.
Yes.
Once you already understand what you want to get from the AI, what you understand, for example, your own project, for example, for our case, if it's a brownfield or a greenfield project, once you understand everything, then you can go to using tech and using AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Like, because you're talking about, again, security. When we talk about AI governance within orgs, having very clear rules around what is allowed versus
Yeah.
what's not allowed, right? Like we've had some very infamous sort of breaches when it comes to AI tools where, company secrets were leaked and whatnot. So having very explicit guidance around things like API keys, tokens, credentials, like customer personal details, any internal, details that could be harmful if they're leaked. So having very clear rules around that. Then I think it's also beneficial to have maybe a sort of like a risk tier system for different AI use cases, right? So low risk would be something like, okay, come like rewriting emails or summarizing text or documents or whatnot. Then you could have sort of medium risk things that can be done with AI, but it would be recommended if someone reviews them. So let's say if you're talking to customers or technical recommendations or debugging, right? And then there could be sort of like more high risk activities, which is again shipping code to production. I would say that's an absolutely like high risk activity, in the sense that I would never just like blindly copy paste what the AI gives me and ship
Yeah.
it off to prod. I would say that, okay, no, that's where the most amount of review is required. Anything around like security related decisions, anything around like financial policy, any legal answers, again, I would sort of flag all of these as more high risk activities. But again, like having like a risk tier system, I think it makes it a lot clearer for individuals across the org to sort of set what their approach should be when it comes to using AI.
Awesome, guys. Great. Well, loving this. So we actually have another good question here, based on what you're talking about, Fatima. What production KPIs do you track or recommend for AI trustworthiness? What are some of the ways, I'll add on to that too, that we can test for this, right? When we're working with building agents and coming up with ways to improve this process.
AI trustworthiness. Do you mind elaborating a little bit, Justin?
Yeah, for example, the way that I see this often playing out in an enterprise setting is around doing observability and evaluations of AI and of agents. So you can do
Yeah.
that at the model level. So you can run at scale queries against models and do AI assisted judgment of the response of those models based on your criteria. These are great ways to be able to get KPIs around the trustworthiness of the AI, at least the alignment of the AI, because trustworthiness is an interesting concept. It's really, to me, a very human concept of trustworthiness.
Yeah.
But like whether or not you can trust I think the sentiment is trust the output that the LLM or the agent is producing. So you do it at the model level, or you can do that at the agent level as well. So at the agent level, it's typically more about did you move from the desired state to from the current state to the desired state in as few steps as possible, or in a path that doesn't violate some other rule. But these are really challenging problems that I think that big enterprises struggle with when they think about model evaluation and agent performance. Great question. Pretty nuanced, but thought we'd share because I like that. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's it's a difficult question to answer. Like I was sort of reading into it a couple of days ago, and I was thinking that, okay, maybe we can sort of approach it like, let's say, let's say you have a simple function and you do like you refactor the function, right? Like if we talk about it like from an engineer's perspective, how would we make sure that the functionality before and after is the same, right? We would write tests, right? I was thinking, okay, maybe we could do that like something similar for when it comes to like using AI tools, right? That, okay, for a given input, are we getting like are we happy with the kind of results that we're getting? So like, creating like a test set and testing against that. But yeah, like Justin said, it's a hard question to answer because, again, the output, it could be harder to parse through, right? Because again, these tools generate freestyle text. So would that test set approach work? But yeah, again, like I think bottom line is that with these AI tools, I think it's really, really important to have that feedback loop, right? Like getting together as teams, identifying common like failure patterns, getting user feedback, right? Like documenting examples of bad outputs. I think that feedback is really important, and I think that can help with establishing AI trustworthiness.
One thing that I'm seeing as well, doing on a daily basis, 10 to 15 calls a day with our cloud community, is like we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like, for example, when we think about infrastructure as code, for example, on Terraform, we have commands that we can run to make sure that, for example, the code that has been generated by AI is actually both secure and valid. And when people speak about trust, I really tend to think about code testing. So, for example, when we think about Terraform, then we can run TFSec, we can run checkoff, we can run, for example, Terraform validates. So that's why I was saying, like, for me, it's less about reinventing the wheel, but really clearly understanding, like, how have I worked until AI came into the picture? And then once AI is here, it's about using what I already know to scale my work. It's like almost automation. You don't automate something you cannot control. You can, and for me, if you don't really understand the way you already work and all of the guardrails, for me, you don't use AI. You use AI for me to scale in a more secure and trustworthy way. It's the way I also mentor our cloud community.
So I love that discussion. In fact, like, so we kind of focused on the model and on the agent evaluation side of it, but also there's the integration of like deterministic tools that we use every single day into the agent's workflow that drive the predictability and the contextual layer as well. So outside of the context that you might provide, the context of the living environment, which is often pulled from other sources, other tools. For example, to your point, Tarak, like TFSec or Chekhov or these types of things, they can give feedback to agents about static code analysis and things like that maybe it didn't pick up just by reading the code, but is obvious because we've codified ways of deterministically calculating that this is a particular potential security vulnerability or something like that. So it's really important too to think about it in terms of the model, and the agent is using a model, and then the agent is also using an ecosystem of tools, and all of these things in combination with context are what you can use to create a harness around an agent or AI that allows it to be able to solve problems in an aligned way where you kind of get consistently reliable results. So yeah, I love that.
So I think, yes, if I take a step back, it's more, as long as you're structured, as long as you have already an existing process, for me, you can use AI to scale your work because you're already in control of your own environment. Once you're in
Yeah,
control, you
yeah,
can use AI
absolutely.
to really scale and not reinventing the wheel. For me, to be honest,
Yeah,
the way I see AI as a new tech. For me, AI is not a buzzword. AI is going to be there for at least, let's say, the 10, 20
yeah,
next
for
years, that
sure.
I would say. But we don't need to reinvent the way we work. We
Yeah,
understand as cloud engineer, or software engineer, we already understand all of our process and all of the work that we need to do. We already know how to work with it within teams, but it's just now we can do that at massive scale.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, but I absolutely agree. I think the same principles apply. Like when it comes
Yes.
to empowering your entire team, leveling up your entire team to use AI tools, like I think the same principles of knowledge sharing apply as would for anything else, right? Any other tool that you would be using within an engineering team. But yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
And on your side, do you have any question for we are lucky to have Justin with us today, but do you have any question about uh I don't know what we're building?
Yeah,
Don't
yeah, yeah,
hesitate. Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to hear your thoughts on what were some of the unique challenges that you faced while building infra code base. And I would love to hear your answer from like a technical perspective and
Yeah.
then sort of like the more user perspective.
So maybe on the user perspective, our goal is like, as founders ourselves, we really need to understand that everything we build, we already have the markets that is following us. Like we always need to have what we call the product market fit. Is like we don't build features. Our
Hmm.
goal with Justin, for example, is like constantly challenging ourselves to improve the way our cloud community is working on a daily basis.
Okay.
So for us, it's like every time we ship, we are very lucky to have the community to always support us. For example, today we released infracode-based templates, a new way for cloud engineers. Instead of reinventing every time the way they work, they can directly go on the infracodebase.com/templates to look at what other people from the community created,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
from that they can consume the other work. So
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, in terms of user, it's make sure that every feature meets the market, and
Hmm.
every feature that we build is to improve what we call the developer experience,
Hmm.
or in our case, the cloud engineering experience. This is
Yeah.
the way I see as a fit, and that's why we do so many calls, and we're so lucky to have the community that support us to always make sure that we don't ship useless features, but
Hmm.
every time we ship something is to improve, is to be beyond the limits of what we
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
accomplish.
Yeah,
Maybe
for sure.
Justin, you can also add on the technical side if you are still with us.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got disconnected. What was the question? Just please repeat it. I
On
apologize.
the technical side, any challenges we encountered since we created InfraCode Base?
Yeah. So, brief history, and then straight to the question is: this was started early this year as a SaaS product, drag and drop design tooling for infrastructure code to bring architects and platform engineering teams closer together, right? And we integrated AI later in the year into that around July. What was very interesting from an AI perspective was once AI was integrated into the product in a meaningful way, people stopped using all of the legacy SaaS features. They didn't want to click buttons. They didn't want to drag and drop. They didn't want to fill out a form and hit a save button. They just wanted to talk to an agent and collaborate with a digital coworker. And so when we took a step back at that and said, look, it's like we have all this technical debt now. We built all these features that were based on an assumption that people were going to be clicking and dragging and touching things in a traditional way. So what was maybe challenging there was like the having the kind of that desire in our hearts to say like, you know what, we're going to not throw it away, but like push all that to the side and start fresh in the way that people are telling us that they want to interact with AI and with infrastructure, and really go fully AI native and kind of abandon all of the legacy SaaS stuff. So it turned out to be a great opportunity in the sense that a lot of what then now is becoming technical debt was no longer in front of us, and it was all of the learning from over a half a year of building and putting that into a brand new product. So that was very interesting. I would say pricing model was something else that was something that comes up when you're building an AI product that you'll come across. If you build one, you'll come across it. A lot of AI companies are not making money. They're burning cash, and they're taking market share, which is great. But philosophically, I think for us, it's like generating, we want to be able to actually be cash positive and create value for everybody else. And so how do you create a model where you can clearly explain the way that people are consuming the AI within a fully agentic and AI based product that is both palatable for entry level B2C as well as for enterprise companies wanting to use it. So I would say kind of going between token based pricing and credit based pricing and request based pricing. You'll find for yourself if you do this, but there's a lot of considerations to make there. And I don't think anybody in the industry has figured out necessarily the exact perfect way. Even Lovable today talks a lot about their pricing model and working through like how to improve that for their customers. So that's an interesting challenge, I think, to go through. And then the last one will probably be around the agent as well. So there's a lot of frameworks out there. And I think what's interesting is if you're playing with AI and if you're really getting serious about agents and you're pro code about it, you've probably tried a couple of different frameworks. And if you've been developing for a while, you've probably come across a lot of constraints that make using those frameworks very difficult to work with. Either they're locked into an ecosystem, like you only use our models when you use this framework, or it might be, well, there's some limitation in like stopping the agent stream because it's buried in a class somewhere that's private and you can't touch it. And so we've built agents and Agent SDK in Azure's all of Azure's frameworks, including the newest Agent SDK, Cloud Agent SDK, and we even at one point had built a fully custom agent from the ground up because we had so many gaps and issues with the SDKs. So that was an interesting challenge, I think, is finding the right way to leverage agents into a product that actually created a great experience and you weren't limited by the framework that you were operating within. That's another challenge that if you're going into AI development, you're going to definitely hit. And it's my hypothesis behind why MIT says 95% of AI projects or prototypes or whatever fail, is because once you get into the project, you realize that either the cloud infra that you're running on is not there yet. They haven't fully built out the services. It doesn't work the way it's sold to work, or the frameworks are too limiting, or they don't work quite the way you expect. So it's not that engineers aren't good. It's not like these problems aren't any newer than what we've ever done using APIs and hosting things and compute services in the cloud. But what is different is that we have a very immature ecosystem which sells itself as 100% ready for production. And so that's where the rub comes when you're building with AI. So those were interesting challenges for us, I think, in building an AI native product and trying to user experience possible with that agent.
The thing that I will say as well is going back on the story of InfraCodeBase, we didn't start thinking about the workspace first, but we started by what you said, Fatima, about the governance. This is what we call the AI foundation layer. Yeah. For example, here, if I share one basically here on the this is a slide that we have. We only have one slide to show to the community. Is basically what we call the AI foundation layer. Is having what you said earlier, the context, the inputs, making sure that every companies, for example, if they are enterprise or mid-market companies, they can come on InfraCodeBase. They can basically onboard all of their existing products, for example, AWS, all of the cloud providers, all of the Git providers as well. So they already have all of the context. And then once they start basically working on the workspace to either work on the greenfield, on the brownfield, or either on cloud security, AI will directly respect and follow all of their guardrails, all of their compliance framework, all of their security rules, and so on. So that's why I really like what you said earlier about the three steps: input, context, and output, is because we started thinking like that to build the AI foundation layer, and then going into the workspace to scale the way we do our work as cloud architect or cloud engineers. So high level, this is what InfraCodeBase looks like, the AI, agentic AI platform for enterprise. Infra design, because we are visual people, visual learners as well, and also code. I don't know if based on that you have any questions, or is it clear?
Yeah, no, that was super clear. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe one thing that we can do as well that I would like to introduce to our community is what I was speaking about in terms of InfraCodeBase / templates. This is what we build with Justin. Is really, instead of every time we need to reinvent the wheel and thinking about how we can get started with AI when we need to manage cloud infrastructures, this is what we build. So here I would share basically the page as well. Is this don't start from scratch? For example, here, as you can see, we just release this template library a few days ago. We already have 200 templates that the community can use. For example, to use it is very easy. Simply need, for example, to look at what other people from the community created. You have the design. You can fork it as well, like the way you would fork it on GitHub. And then you have, for example, if you want to work on Kubernetes, if you want to work on Terraform. So I also wanted to share with the community a practical way of how they can get started using AI at scale.
Yeah, and one interesting thing about this too is like code generation is a thing, right? We're all using other tools to do different stuff and we're finding out what works for us. We know that cloud has a specific set of expertise and doing infrastructure as code is different than software engineering because of the level of contextual information and things that you need on top of it to get it right and to not jeopardize mission critical systems. But yeah, what I think is also really interesting about this is the fact that in this model, the agent is actually doing the design for you in real time as it's generating code. Because one of the other issues I have with AI generated code is the amount of code that it can create and the lack of explainability of that code and the fact that you have to like just basically if it generates 5,000 lines of code to understand it, you've got to read it and you got to go through it and know what's there. So by having an agent that can do architecture design and work with you to do that part of it as well, two things. Number one is immediate transparency into like what's been created and how it's been set up and whether or not it met the intent of what you were trying to do. And the other thing is that it reduces the toil in cloud architecture because you don't have to do these designs manually and you don't have to make sure that code and design stay in sync. One common problem is that design happens as a one-time activity at the beginning of a project or platform build or whatever it is. The code evolves over time, but the architecture doesn't keep up. And so that's one way. And then the other way is that you may have a bunch of code that's not documented. There is no architecture design. There is no diagram or visualization of what goes on. So by connecting to existing code and then creating architecture diagrams from that, you create the ability to tell compelling stories about the environment that you're operating in. So I just want to make sure you call that out. The diagram is nice, but just to be clear, nobody created that diagram by hand. An agent created that for you as a part of executing against your desire to create cloud infrastructure.
One thing that I can add as well, just to go a little bit, because we are tech guys as well. So for me, it's like I really want to show not slide, but like concretely how can people do it. For example, here, this is what we are speaking about, the AI foundation layer, where, for example, here you have all the workflows. For example, for people who are working on Terraform modules, they can basically here create a plan, a way to basically for the AI to follow all of the steps. So that's why I was saying earlier, if you understand really the steps before even thinking about using AI, once you are using, for example, InfraCodeBase, then you don't need to reinvent yourself. You can basically onboard all of your way of working. Here, for example, you can also look at here all of the rule set. We were speaking about with Fatima, for example, about the governance, the compliance, and so on. So if, for example, you're working on AWS WAF, on Azure, and so on, then you can directly import from URL, or you can upload files as well. In terms of MCPs, for example, here, which is very important, is like you have all the existing tooling that you're already using on a daily basis. For example, you could think about Terraform, you could think about the cloud providers, about the GitHub and everything. And once you have done it, then this is an example here where I needed to really understand, okay, what did we provision in the cloud in terms of Azure subscription? Being able, for example, to do the security, understand the security vulnerabilities and the misconfiguration, create an Azure threat modeling diagram like Justin said it. We did it by prompt, and then here also shifting left directly. Shifting left is like once we understand all the security vulnerabilities and the misconfiguration, the goal is basically to write either the bicep or the Terraform code to do the remediation. And here you have the design, and you also have the code here, for example, with Terraform, but it's not limited to Terraform. Obviously, you can use it for Bicep, CloudFormation, OpenTofu, and so on. So this was an example, like think always about governance, think about input and context before you even start building or refactoring with AI.
So speaking of governance, we have a really interesting and complicated and nuanced question in the chat. I'll personally try to tackle this one for our viewer. How is AI being prevented from being abused? I think with the everything else, conscious effort should be made to prevent the oligarchs of billions of dollars from controlling the rest of the world. I'm concerned about AI's compliance and governance if it's not already being done. What do you think about it? So, okay, I'm going to give you my spicy takes or hot takes on this, whatever. So valid concern is one that we think about a lot. So at a global level, no single company or open source project can fully prevent the concentration of power around AI. Large models, compute, and capital are real forces. So, at scale, that's ultimately difficult and requires regulation, public policy, and transparency from model providers. What we can control is how AI is built and used inside of real systems. So, Infra Codebase was intentionally designed to put constraints, auditability, and human intent back into the loop. So first, it doesn't act totally autonomously. It'll do what you ask it to do, but within the constraints that you give it with explicit definitions, policies, and guardrails written by humans. The system doesn't decide for you. You help it to get to the right answer. Second is everything is observable. You know exactly what actions are being taken, what's being recommended, and what changes are happening. And we talked about observability as well in the terms of architecture and the way that you can see what the agent is actually building. We also think about it in terms of permissions and scopes. So making sure that AI is constrained by the same access controls as humans. When you connect to these like MCP servers, for example, that Tarak was talking about, they require the same types of authorization as a human person. So there's a whole concept around agent identities. It's something if you're interested in it, I would go and do some research around the evolution of agent identity and where it's going. But the goal is like no hidden escalations and no implicit authority. And then I would say probably fourth would be the goal is to decentralization of capability, not centralization of power. So Infra Codebase is not about replacing engineers or concentrating decision making. It's about giving more teams safe, governed access to infrastructure automation without requiring a small group of experts or single vendor to control everything that goes on in the ecosystem. So I'm going to pull this one off. I'm going to hide this one off the page. I think it's a really cool question. I think it's super nuanced, and there's a ton of like economic concerns. There's societal and environmental concerns with AI. These are really hard, some philosophical and political type questions, but I tried to answer that non-politically in that it's really like there's things we can control, things we can't control. And for the things that we can really work hard to create great systems for engineers to do their best work.
And I think this is the most important as well, is like the goal is not about tech. The goal is not about process. The goal for me is like, how can we always improve the way we do things on a daily basis? Like I was saying, AI, we have different ways to get to use it. For me, as a DevSecOps as well, the most important is always security. I can scale something as long as it's secure, as long as I can use it at scale in enterprise settings. But at the end of the day, it's about the mindset as well. We think a lot about AI, we think a lot about processes and all, but at the end of the day, it's all about the mindset. If we have the mindset to check, for example, when we use AI before even creating a new repository or provisioning the infrastructure directly, we directly think about testing the code that has been shipped either by us or by AI at massive scale, then it's already a win. And like that, we can use AI at scale, even in prod. And we've just seen, for example, we are using our product every single day to basically provision infrastructure. But because we have already the right mindset, we know that you always need to check to scan the code that you are either writing manually or writing with AI, and it's just best practices that I would say.
Yeah, non-technically speaking, the things that the industry thinks about, and of course we think about, are AI that's aligned with organizational values and ethical standards, human impact, augmentation, and empowerment, making sure that's a priority, and then embedding trust in that AI lifecycle when it comes to, I guess, governance ethics, the data quality or compliance of what's actually being produced from AI. This is particularly important when you talk about something like infrastructure code, because so much of your organizational policy and security positioning and things like that are embedded in the way that engineers work every day, we're trusted as humans to deliver those right outcomes for our company. So we don't create risk. We don't cause brand harm, damage, reputational risk, and things like this. And we expect our AIs to be doing similar types of things with us, for us, and we shouldn't be forcing it down AI's throat to be that way, which is a big component of like, why build a foundation layer? Why try to create a harness that helps the agent act in an aligned way?
So I think it was a good, to be honest, I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot listening to both of you, and also with all the questions that we had from the community. Do you have any conclusion for us, Fatima, to share with the community? Anything that you would like?
I think the underlying theme that I think has come up over and over again in our conversation is, again, the importance of you proofreading and using your critical thinking skills. These tools are absolutely fantastic. You should for sure be leveraging them in your day-to-day workflows. But ultimately, you still have the power as the developer.
Yeah, I'm gonna sum that up to say it's important to stay in control. Code is not your value as a developer; it's your humanity. It's your ability to connect to your company, to your customer, to real problems that need to be solved, and to leverage your own critical thinking on top of AI to really be able to solve some of this stuff. So Fatima, look, we're so grateful that you did this with us today. She's wonderful. We shared her course earlier in the chat, so please
much.
go to the chat and find her course. I've put her LinkedIn profile here as well on the bottom. So I know it's a lot of numbers and letters there. Hopefully you were able to capture that. If not, pause the video, follow her on LinkedIn. Would love for you to be a part of her story. If you liked what you saw from a product perspective, and we only really sort of showed you the surface of what's there, infracodebase.com is where you can go to sign up, give the product a try. Please give us feedback. We're very engaged with the community and would love for you to be a part of our growth story and a part of how we make the product amazing for every single engineer who touches it. So Fatima, thank you so much for the insights. Tarak, thank you for guiding us today, and appreciate everybody for being a part of the story.
And for everyone who has other questions, I know that maybe we didn't answer all of the questions today, but if you have any other question, reach out to us, reach out to Justine, to Fatima, and to me. Always open door. I will try to answer everything on this, but thanks a lot for the community. Thanks a lot for your continuous support. And I will speak for myself, I wouldn't be here without all of you. So like Justine said it, we love you, and see you in February for the next one.